right. FYI, this is being recorded. So let's keep losing my presenter. There it is. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what are person accounts? And person accounts, I've heard them described as several different ways because in Salesforce, you have leads and contacts and accounts and opportunity. Those are the standard objects. What person accounts are is I've heard it called like a hybrid. It's something that is a blend of a contact and an account. And I have one of my slides, I'll kind of show you an example of why it's considered that. But here it says it stores information by combining certain account and contact fields into a single record. It's not something that's available out of the box in Salesforce. You have to have that functionality enabled by support. And then after the enablement happens, there's that then creates what's called the person account record type in Salesforce. And then there's a couple other requirements. So the account object has to have at least one record. User profiles that have read permission on accounts also must have read permission on contacts, because there's a correlation that I'll get into in a little bit later between account and contact, both being a hybrid and also there being a relationship there. And then the org-wide default sharing is set so that either contact is controlled by the parent or both account and contact are private. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of how org-wide defaults work, but that is a Salesforce admin functionality that I recommend spending some time with if you're unfamiliar. This is an example of what a person account record would look like in Salesforce. So you see that there are correlations. There's some blended functionality here. You see you have an account owner, which you would normally find with a Salesforce account or a contact. Then you have the account name, and the account name is the person. This is their name. Title, email, billing, and then billing address in here as well. And then account record type is person. So and similarly with contacts and leads, you can also add custom fields in here, but this is meant to be a kind of this blended account contact type record type. And so the next question is who uses person accounts? And so in my experience, what I've noticed is that it tends to be pretty popular among nonprofits, education, healthcare, and also organizations generally where their customers are not other businesses, but their customers are individuals. And that tends to fit in pretty well with the three kind of verticals I mentioned above. And so an example of that might be like in my experience, I've worked with nonprofits, and their accounts are what is considered a family. I think it's called a family account. So it might be like the Smiths or the Johnsons is the person account, or there could be a person account, which is an individual who happens to be a member of a nonprofit or a patient. I know the Health Cloud uses person accounts quite a bit. So the account is the person, hence person account. And so all of that information about them that doesn't necessarily make them a contact from a hierarchy perspective is what makes them an account. And so that then leads us into, okay, well, what's the correlation here with Pardot? And because as you know, Pardot will sync leads, contacts, accounts, opportunities, and campaigns. And there is that functionality with Pardot to be able to use person accounts. And I'm going to go into that a little more detail, some of the particulars. But what I want to kind of get to right now is the actual enablement of person accounts in Pardot. And this has actually been changed fairly recently. It used to be more involved to get person accounts enabled. There was almost always you had to involve support, and there was a lot of back and forth with support, and what they ask you a bunch of questions, and then you have to kind of wait on them to enable it, and then you have to do your own config. And with I might even be this most recent release, they've gotten rid of the middleman. They've gotten out of the person account enablement business for Pardot anyways, and said there's just too much volume problem, I'm guessing. And so now they've made it so that people can do self-service enablement in Pardot. And so this is what that looks like. I apologize if it's a little on the blurry side. But all of the enablement of person account syncing happens happens on the connector. So in Lightning, in Pardot for Lightning, you go into the connector and go down, and where you see connected campaigns and marketing data sharing. When you go into the connector preferences, there is a checkbox there that says sync with person accounts, sync prospects with person accounts. And so once you enable that, that's great. It's unfortunately not right. You can't just go back and say, never mind, I don't want to sync anymore. It is a permanent thing. So this definitely took a lot of time out of it, because now you're actually able to say, cool, enable Pardot to sync with person accounts. This is not available until you've already done the work in Salesforce, however, to get Salesforce to enable it to set up what your record type is. There's going to be situations most likely where your connector user may not actually have view access to the person account record type. So you will have to go in and update the profile for the connector to ensure that it does have access to the person account record type, because otherwise it won't actually know what to do with it. It won't see it. It won't be able to. You can enable it all day, but you won't be able to actually see anything. So that's pretty important. But this is that first step: enable person account syncing. So Pardot syncs with person accounts in two different ways. The first one is that Pardot will create leads and sync with person accounts. And how that works is, the first way that this works is that you have, like, let's say you have a net new prospect that comes in, and you assign it to the connector user, to a connected user rather, and that then creates a lead in Salesforce. Now that record is a lead, but then on conversion, that record doesn't become a contact. That record creates a account, a person. It creates a person account and an opportunity if you need to, if you want to add that person as a contact role on an opportunity. That's the first way that this works. It goes Pardot, leads, convert, person accounts. And as you see here, this is the Pardot is not going to merge the two records into one view in Salesforce. Field mapping is the same. Contact fields, this is important. Contact fields will map to prospect fields, and Salesforce account fields will map to Pardot account fields. So when you're doing the actual config of person account to account in Pardot, you have to go to two different places to do your field mapping, because there may be fields on the person account that are syncing with Pardot that may not be on the contact that technically exists behind the scenes that you will still need to map. So there is a field mapping that you have to do at the prospect level in Pardot and at the account level in Pardot. And this is a great graphic that the really cool people at Mark Cloud Consulting over in the UK, one of their senior consultants, Laura Formby, created this graphic, and I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly, I couldn't describe this better than this. So I reached out to her, let her know that I was going to use this, and I told her I was going to give her the credit, and she was happy to help and appreciative. So this is a great representation of how this works. A lead is created, and then sales decides, and let's say that sales decides that this lead should be qualified. The lead conversion creates the person account and the opportunity, which replaces a contact and account. So the person replaces the contact and the account, because now it's just person account and opportunity. That's how the conversion process works here, and how it's different. And then once this conversion happens from lead to person account, that will then flow back downstream back into Pardot, and will now start syncing. Will create the person account record and the account record in Pardot, and will then start syncing correctly with this newly converted record in Salesforce. There's a second way that Pardot will sync with person accounts, and that is just straight up use person accounts. Completely get rid of the idea of using leads. And there are plenty of I have encountered organizations that just don't use leads. It's not part of their. They maybe are not overly B2B in their sales or lead gen, and Pardot is less of a lead gen and more of a nurture and engagement platform. And leads aren't really a thing. So if someone fills out a form, they will when they are mapped when they sync the Salesforce, it'll just automatically create a person account. So it'll completely get rid of the lead. And this is something that is you really need to know that this is what you want to do, because there are plenty of gotchas here. It's like, oh man, you decided suddenly that you aren't actually using this anymore. You aren't using person accounts. Be very intentional when you do this, because if you find yourself just make sure that this is not like something where you're changing your mind very often, because it is very important to be as consistent as possible in this. And I don't often see it happen where they just create person accounts, but that is one of the ways that this can be that Pardots can be configured to interact with Salesforce when it comes to your person accounts. And I do want to remind you guys that there is the Q&A tab. If you have questions or if you have any comments, feel free to put them in there. Yeah, it's over. There's like a little chat thing on the top right, and then from there you can. I think there's DMs, chat, and Q&A. So feel free to use that. All right, so let me get my presenter view back. There we go. So this is something else that is important when it comes to enabling person account, is if you were to decide, and again, I'm sorry if this is blurry, but if you were to decide create person accounts instead of leads, that is a setting that you have to enable in here as well at the connector level. So you see at the top, it says sync prospects with person accounts. That's great, gonna do that. But if you say, go to a second level and say, nope, I really don't want to create leads, you have to then identify what the default person account record type is. That's important. And if you are using person accounts, there's a decent chance that you are using more than one record type for this. You may be using a person account for if you're healthcare patients, a person account for current patients, former patients, or they may be person accounts by specific membership type, like current members, former members, etc. So that's something that you're going to need to set if you are going to be creating person accounts instead of leads. That you do have to set what that default record type is for person accounts. Something else that's kind of interesting when it comes to how person accounts and exist in Pardot is the data architecture around it. This is another great graphic that Laura put together, and I feel like this explains it pretty well. And I'm going to have another example that I'm going to show you after this. And what this does is this looks at on the left is the more traditional relationship of prospect to account, and then where you have several prospects that can be part of a single account, and that mimics that mirrors the contact account relationship in Salesforce. Here, a prospect is the account belonging to a prospect is the prospect's person account. So it's a one-to-one, and there can't be more than one prospect per person account. And this is actually an example of that. So in this case, you have on the left, you have Michael, and you have his prospect record, and you see that first name, email, company, account name is Michael, which is the same as the first name. When you click into Michael, now you see Michael at the account level as well. This is a record that has a person account attached to it. And how Pardot makes sense of that, or tries to make sense of that, is by setting the account relationship at this level on the prospect record. So the account name is the person account. And this can be kind of strange because in Salesforce, the record that is in use for everything is going to be the person account. However, in Pardot, you don't have the same visibility on the account that you have on the prospect when it comes to prospect activity. Like, you know, on the left, you have all the landing page and links and emails. That information still is on the prospect record in Pardot. That is not on the account level. That's not on the account that's not on the account view. So the account view is just here, is the same view as if it were a normal account, but instead of it being a company, it's an individual. And otherwise, it's the same. It's going to be, you have custom fields that you're going to map at the account level back to the person account fields. And those fields will show up on the person account in Pardot, but they won't show up on the prospect record. The prospect record is still mapping to contact and lead records, contact and lead fields. That's really important because it can be a little confusing if you're operating entirely out of the person account in Salesforce, and you go to try and create a custom field for the account, and then you're in your prospects and you're trying to find a custom field and it's not there. It's because it's not there. Everything has to be done out of everything there. If you're creating a custom field on the specifically for the person account, it has to be mapped at the account level. And I kind of already touched on this a little bit, person accounts, them being hybrid record types, and how it creates two record, a prospect and an account. There is what I kind of consider this hidden contact record if you're not using it, that is available, and you can use it to sync fields if you need to. But you have to go in, like I said, both prospect and the account field sync to select the specific fields that you need. So something I wanted to do was talk about a interesting little lessons learned. This is something that happened with me fairly recently. And here's kind of what happened. This is hopefully, if you guys are ever using person accounts, kind of learn from my misfortunes and hopefully avoid a lot of frustration. So in this situation, the client's Salesforce org is using leads and contacts and accounts. There was a decision that was made to migrate off of contacts and to use person accounts, which is great. It's fine, whatever. The problem is that they didn't loop Pardot in, me specifically, as I was managing this Pardot project, or at least was involved. I wasn't looped into it until well after the fact, and they said, okay, how do we sync Pardot? How do we sync our person accounts with Pardot? So I go, here's how you do it, and I did it. Here's the problem: is they had all these contacts that were synced to records to prospect records in Pardot. When they chose to go off of contacts and into person accounts, that effectively orphaned or kind of stranded all of these previously existing mapped records from Pardot to Salesforce. They were mapping between Pardot and Salesforce at the contact level. Suddenly, all these records were just moved. The line was cut and they were pushed over. As I mentioned earlier, because of the two different ways that Pardot will create records in Salesforce, specific to person accounts, they'll create leads or they'll create person accounts. This one was configured to create leads. So what happened was these records were suddenly stranded, and when they went to go resync, because they were still assigned to a connected user, when it went to go resync, it created all new leads for all of these contacts, for all these now person accounts. And that set off all kinds of sales notifications to people, and it ended up being, why am I getting all these notifications for established customers? These are not leads. So that's a problem. And it was a bit of a head scratcher. It was okay, this is a strange situation. How do we fix this? And as with a lot of things, I ended up having to go to support and saying, hey, here's my problem. I know what I need to do. What needs to happen is these records already exist. but now they exist as person accounts. What we ended up having to do was I had to identify that the point where all of these leads got created, all these errant leads got created, and I had to add them to a campaign, and then from the campaign membership, add them to a list in Pardot. So if they're a part of this campaign of being errant leads, or they should have been created, and add them to this list, and then I had to go to support and say, hey, I need all of these records to have their CRM ID wiped and repointed. So they're all mapping to CRM IDs for all mapping to lead IDs. I need that to not be that way. I need these to all be pointed to person account IDs. I was thinking that this may actually not be possible. I've never come across it. I haven't really heard of it. I didn't know if they would actually do it or not. It turns out it actually is okay. And so once I was able to isolate the leads or the records in Pardot that need to be repointed, and they got with their advanced support people and figure out how to do it, it actually was not that bad, at least from my perspective. He may have had a lot of trouble, but he didn't say so anyways. So we were able to successfully wipe the CRM ID and repoint all these records in Pardot to the person accounts. That was one of those things where I had never really considered that as a possibility that would happen, because in a normal relationship here, we have leads and contacts, and you have that conversion process. Person accounts kind of throws a bit of a knife in, bit of a fork in it, and you're like, well, this is a strange record type that requires kind of separate or different relationships than traditional leads or contacts. So in that scenario, you had to everything had to be repointed, and luckily it worked out. The one thing that I am noticing as being kind of an issue is that for this repointing to work, the primary email address on the lead has to be the same as the primary email address on the person account. Otherwise, the repointing wasn't going to work. So I'm working through that with a client right now where they're having that problem, where they have primary, secondary email addresses, and it's not going to key off of the secondary email address. It has to be primary to primary. So that was a lesson learned that was over the course of several days of trying to figure out how this is going to work. And eventually we got through it. But so that is my request or suggestion to you, is if you are working in a Salesforce org and you guys decide that you're going to move from contacts to person accounts, I would recommend working more in concert with them, with people on the Salesforce side, to make sure that those records don't get stranded, that they don't get marooned, because otherwise you're going to find yourself Pardot's going to do what it's meant to do. It's going to trigger a bunch of leads that are going to get created, because it says, oh, all these records are here and they're assigned to a connected user, so I'm going to create leads, and that's going to cause problems in your org. Something else I want to share is that this is another situation that I found myself in, and this was with a healthcare client. So converting a lead into a person account only in certain situations, and then mapping that, and then having that sync back down from lead to person account in Pardot. So in this scenario, I had a net new prospect in Pardot that is assigned and synced to Salesforce, which creates a new lead. However, the prospect record has a field value for record type, and when a specific value is selected at sync, it automatically triggers a flow in Salesforce to auto-convert the lead into a person account. However, it's only going to do that if the record type is a specific value. That triggers the sync and the auto convert that will turn it from a lead into a person account. I did have some issues here. I did several different attempts at this, and it was caused a lot of problems where I had to. It ended up being that the make sure that you need to have person account syncing enabled, because you could try and convert this all day, and let's say it turns into a person, let's say it does the conversion, but if you're not syncing with person accounts in Pardot, then your conversion effort in Salesforce is only going to show up in Salesforce. So that's important to make sure that that the person account syncing is on. And then second is that you have to have a default record type for the lead object to be configured. If that's not, if a default record type for lead record type hasn't been configured, according to support, this is not going to work. And this is as a result of me just having to go back and forth with them. Tyler says, I wish this was around when I was with a B2C org. Yeah. Yeah, this is person accounts tend to, it tends to, it solves some problems, but can also sometimes create them. But yes, B2C orgs definitely will use person accounts if they have customers that are individuals, not necessarily organizations. So one of the last things I want to tell you about is things that are important to remember. Is that contact fields sync bidirectionally with fields on the prospect records, but it does not do so on the account. Account fields in Pardot are read-only, and they can't be mapped into forms. So these are fields that can only accept data from Salesforce. So if you are trying to build a form in Pardot and you're trying to map, saying, oh, I want to write to the person account field, it's not going to work. You're not able to grab a person account field in the form to write to it. Something else to be to note is if you need to do a batch import of person accounts, it is critically important that you include the person account contact ID, because the account ID will not cut it. Pardot is not able to recognize account IDs. So it's the person account contact ID, which is effectively the contact ID. If you're doing an import that you need to map immediately between your Pardot import and Salesforce. Something else, and I mentioned this earlier, is depending on the connector type that you use, it might be necessary to update the profile in Salesforce for the connector user to include visibility to the person account record type. That's just because I've had issues where for some reason it's not finding certain things. And that's because we created a person account record type, but then we didn't go the next step of ensuring that the connector profile actually can access and see the person account record type. If it can't see it, you can't. You're basically done. You can't do anything. Person accounts can cause sync errors for a number of reasons. I've seen all kinds of exotic ones that what I call kind of hard sync errors and soft sync errors. Like I've seen cross-reference can't access a cross-reference lookup ID or something, and I've learned that that's kind of a soft sync error. It's still data still passing back and forth. It's just basically throwing kind of like a little flag saying, hey, there's some visibility issue here. The only way that I was able to fix that was by swapping out the connector user from the default B2BMA connector to a admin level connector, someone who had admin rights, and then it was fine. It was just that for some reason there's something about the connector user that Pardot automatically provisions that it doesn't. It just doesn't give you that same level of visibility that an admin can. So it can be frustrating, and sometimes you'll go to your sync errors and you'll see it balloon, and you're like, oh my god, what is going on here? Sometimes it's just a soft sync error, and sometimes you just got to kind of unfortunately swap out, because I've gone through and I've tried to add mesh permissions to the connector user and create custom things, and it just keeps throwing the same error. And so the only way I got it to clear was by using a different connector user. And I don't really have an explanation about why. It's just kind of what happened. Person accounts can be added to campaigns and have campaign history related lists. So you can use them as your campaign members. You can also add person accounts to opportunities using contact roles, the related list. So what I mentioned earlier, when you do that point of conversion of lead to person account, you have the ability to create an opportunity and add them as a opportunity. In Pardot, that relationship will be with I believe it'll be with the hidden contact record. I'm gonna need to double check that, but it should be with it's gonna show the prospect record as being the record that is related. to that opportunity. It's not going to show the person account. It's going to be the person account may be there to be clickable, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be, oh, this is the person account that's showing up in Pardot. It's going to show the relationship at the prospect level. And similarly, this is something else that's kind of that I had an issue with a client where they were using person accounts. It was a nonprofit, and they were really wanting the ability to have primary and secondary email addresses sync down into Pardot at the same level, with the same utility. So you know how you can the main email address in Pardot, and you can use that to send outbound email. It's not available. Similarly, leads and contacts, same things with person accounts. You can't have two primary email addresses. So you can have a secondary one all you want, but it will just be just for your own record. But it's not, you're not going to be able to use that in the same way that you can use a primary email address. And that's something that, like I said, it tended to come up more often than not with nonprofits. So I realized this was kind of a quick one, but that's really what I have about person accounts. And then a couple of things. I'm starting at least one recurring meeting. One of them is going to be around doing a 1 hour Pardot specialist exam review. Kind of just go through with people who are interested in taking the exam, kind of walk through some of the material. If you are experienced and you want to be on the line as well to kind of give some feedback and thoughts, I'm more than welcome to do that. First one is going to be on the 10th, so about a little under a month from now. And I'm also doing I'm kind of toying with the idea of doing a kind of a Pardot 101, which is it's not a specialist exam prep. It's a kind of a foundational, people who have either never used Pardot or they're very functional and very familiar with other clouds, other Salesforce clouds, and have heard about Pardot and run up against it, but don't know much. It's meant to be kind of a high level. Here's what Pardot is. Here's how it works with Sales Cloud. Here's the relationship, and kind of just answer some pretty basic questions to help people get a better grasp, get their arms around Pardot. And I'll be going into a Pardot demo org to kind of do some show and tell as well. That one is scheduled to be towards the end of January of this coming year. So if you're interested in that as well, feel free to participate, either as a co-presenter or if you want to, co-presenter or as somebody in the crowd. Catherine says, I've been putting off taking my exam. Really would enjoy the review of someone who's taken the test. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not going to be like a multi-hour, like we're just going to kind of dig into some of the material, some of the study guides, and kind of talk through some of the stuff that may be on the exam, things that you should drill into and kind of be very familiar with conceptually about some of the material. So that's going to be that's the plan. I may, if one gathers more steam than another, then I may just focus on one over the other. We'll see. So that's really all I got. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to connect with me there. Thank you guys so much for taking part of your evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And yeah. Thank you so much. I'll once I figure out how to get the recording of this, I'll make sure to send it out. All right, guys, have a good rest of your evening, afternoon, or morning. Bye.